folks, César Cantú here, once again, Chief Editor of Nearshore Americas. I'm joined today by Peter Ryan, Chief President and Principal Analyst at Ryan Strategic Advisory. Peter, how's everything? How are you doing?
Good to be here. Thanks, César.
Great to hear that. So, folks, this is a special edition of the Nearshore Forum. As some of you might be aware, we'll be hosting an event in London very soon, Crossconnect Forum, March the 8th, 10 a.m., London time, of course. The event has several objectives, but the main one is to promote trade across the Atlantic, specifically between Europe and the Latin America and Caribbean regions. We'll be hosting close to 20 experts speaking at the event, people from North America, from the Caribbean, from Latin America, from the UK, Eastern and Western Europe, and even from South Africa. They'll be discussing a wide range of topics from economic, political, and business issues, all of them related to increasing and strengthening the ties across the Atlantic. We've noticed a lot of enthusiasm for the event, so if you have any plans to register, I recommend you do it pretty soon, certainly before the end of this month. If you want to register, you can do it at crossconnectforum.com. I'll probably be linking to the page in the description below. This will be uploaded to YouTube, so you might find the link down there. So, Peter, with all the promotional work out of the way, shall we dive into the topic at hand?
Yes, please.
Of course. Peter, we know that there's a lot of interest from U.S. companies in Latin America and the Caribbean as spots for the delivery of global services. It makes sense. I mean, you look at the data, the context, macroeconomic situation makes a lot of sense. But why would European businesses find the region appealing, considering that they have a nearshore or perhaps several nearshores of their own?
They do have several nearshores of their own, but I think what it comes down to is the fact that so many businesses, if they're looking for business services or technology services, are desperately trying to diversify what their shoring strategy is. César, when you consider, as you say, in Western Europe or in the United Kingdom, it's obvious. You can go into Central Europe, you can go into Eastern Europe, you might even go into North Africa. That's great. But what we also know is, while every country has its own areas of specialty, they also have their own limitations. And by exploring the Caribbean, by exploring Latin America, effectively what's happening is businesses in Western Europe and the UK are opening themselves up to new opportunities, to new areas of strength, to new centers of excellence. And this is why I think the Crossconnect Forum is such an important event. I've never seen anything like this, and I'm so excited to participate.
I'm very glad to hear that. So, to put it in very few words, it's a matter of diversification, more than just outright choice of one option over the other, just diversification.
Yeah, look, the days of companies working with one outsourcer that's based in one location are long over. The reality is that any forward-looking company, whether it's in some of the more mature sectors or some of the new emerging ones, they're desperately looking to try and find strategies where they're going to diversify their risk across several different countries and potentially even several different regions.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. In spite of their interest, my guess is that there are some issues that could arise when sourcing between Europe and Latin America and the Caribbean. Time zones, for example. You see European businesses finding problems with time zone differences.
But the reality is that time zone differences are going to come up no matter where you are. I've got a lot of clients that are based in Western Europe, and they do business with outsourcers that are based in the Philippines. And there's a significant amount of time difference between Western Europe and the Philippines and the far East Asia. I've got a lot of clients that deal in Western Europe with companies based in India. Now that's another big issue just in terms of those time zones. And it's not even just time zones, but it could be even potentially be time César. Like, you think about it, a flight from London, for example, to Johannesburg is about 11, 12 hours. A flight from London to Mumbai is going to be a good 8, 9 hours. To Manila will be 12 hours. A flight from London to Montego Bay or to Kingston is going to be 8 hours. You're actually in a better position from a time travel perspective going between Western Europe and the Caribbean than you would be to some of these more far distant, far off locations that certainly bring a lot of value in their own right, but are a lot further and will require potentially more time spent on airplanes and traveling.
Okay, what about cultural alignment? Because I mean, I can see the Caribbean and the UK being, well, sort of culturally aligned, especially given the history of both countries, their relationship
Yeah.
along history. But I would imagine that most people see a wider cultural gap between Latin America and the UK and the rest of Europe, except for Spain. And even then, there's some cultural differences. What about that sort of difference?
Look, we shouldn't underestimate the potential for differences in cultures, the way people will comport themselves, the way business is done between cultures, as you say, language as well. But let's not forget, César, that globalization over the course of the past 30 years has reduced a lot of those issues. One of the things I think is important is the fact that, to a large degree, English is the universal language in terms of commerce. And something that I can tell you is, if you get to an outsourcer that's based, whether it's IT services or business processes, anywhere in the Spanish-speaking American nearshore, odds are that those executives who a West European will be dealing with will speak fluent English. This is one of the things that I think is very, very important. So, while I'm not going to say that cultural misalignment might happen, I think the chances of that today are significantly reduced compared to what they might have been, say, 30 years ago.
Let's talk about workforce. So,
Yeah.
in your view, how does the Latin American and Caribbean workforces compare to those of, say, India, Philippines, and Eastern Europe? Which advantages do you see from the CALA region in compared to these other big outsourcing hotspots?
Well, every location brings to the table its own advantages and its own weaknesses. I think from the standpoint of the CALA region, there's a few things. Number one, volume of workforce. When you take a look at the number of sheer individuals that are involved in IT services and business processes, there's a very, very large number relative to other parts of the world. Take into account the fact that Mexico, as a single market for delivery, is the same size as the Philippines. It's the same size as Egypt. That's really nothing to sneeze at. Take into account the fact as well, the number of young people that are going into business-related courses in university or technical school or technical courses in university. There's a significant number of people that are being pumped out as graduates that are able to take on this work, not just in the CALA region for the US and the Canadian businesses, but now very much so businesses in the United Kingdom, in France, in Italy, in Spain, as you mentioned as well, Germany. There's a whole host of opportunities here that will allow businesses in Western Europe to be able to take advantage of perhaps outsourcing operators that are close to home in locations such as the Czech Republic or Poland, but can also take a look at what they have on offer in terms of a menu of options in the Caribbean and Spanish-speaking Latin America.
Going back to the topic of diversification and again staying on the workforce, what are some of the perhaps not disadvantages but opportunities, or well, yes, let's keep it at disadvantages of CALA when compared with other locations, with other core shores?
Well, I think a clear disadvantage from the outset, and I think it'll be a short-term one, is a lack of familiarity between West European businesses and the CALA region in terms of what can be done, where are the centers of excellence, what countries are the ones that they might want to scope out, which are the ones that perhaps might not be ready for prime time. But that will be overcome with education and awareness, especially with events like the Crossconnect forum that's happening in London. That's one thing. A second point I think that might be a bit of a challenge is the lack of native language skills beyond English and Spanish. going into Western Europe, you've got English, you've got French, you've got German, you've got Dutch, Scandinavian languages as well, all that need to be taken into consideration. Italian, you could even make an argument that Poland and the Czech Republic have roared in to the developed economies, and there's questions about the extent to which you'll be able to find fluency of these different languages in the CALA region. That could be something as well. But all in all, I think that the pros and the strengths massively outweigh the threats and the weaknesses.
So Peter,
and there's one other point too, César. I'll just bring this up too, and that's accessibility. One of the reasons I think that the CALA region has done so well in terms of being a base of business and IT service support for North America has been the fact that from almost every major commercial center in the US and Canada, you can fly into almost every different country. I could get a plane here in Montreal and go into Mexico. I could go to Colombia. I could go to different parts of the Caribbean. There's even parts of Central America that I can visit directly. These connections are developing between Western Europe and the CALA region, but outside of a few connections, say between Spain and Spanish-speaking Latin America, and maybe the UK, and I believe they've got some flights into the Caribbean direct. There might be a flight from the UK into Mexico City and one into Colombia. I don't think that the flights are, say, robust from many other European capitals into that part of the world. There's a lot of work that will need to be done there.
Understood. So, Peter, if I remember correctly, you'll be moderating a debate on the merits of the 4 core shores, so-called Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, and the CALA region. The debate has been hot for a while, but it seems that now, today, given what's happening in the world, it is more relevant than ever. Could you explain specifically why is that relevance taking place now?
Look, there's a huge amount of disruption going on in the world. We've got economic disruption. We've got security disruption in terms of the ongoing conflict with Russia and Ukraine. There's saber rattling happening in parts of Asia, especially around the Taiwan question with China. Let's be very blunt here, César. The opportunity for an organization to look at what's on offer in different parts of the world and to come up with a diversified shoring strategy just makes sense. And for, I think, a long time, there has been a reluctance among West European businesses to consider the Caribbean or to consider Latin America. But now it's not a case of it's a nice to have. It's almost essential to think about what you can do in some of these different countries and where some of the sweet spots are going to line up. It makes good business sense. It makes good sense from the business continuity standpoint. And it also makes sense, I think, in terms of keeping the options open over the long term.
You mentioned reluctance by European businesses, specifically Western European businesses. Some of the sources we've spoken to have mentioned not reluctance, but, and I think this is the word they actually use, ignorance. They just don't know much about the CALA region. They, again, one of our sources mentioned that for many European businesses, Latin America and the Caribbean are mainly sources of raw materials. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe tourism as well.
And tourism too, exactly.
Yep.
So, what can CALA governments and businesses do to change that? Because I guess it might take a while.
It might take a while, but it might be faster than you think if they're able to strike while the iron's hot with the right messaging. And to my mind, the key is demonstrating that they have the human talent and that they've got the processes and the business friendliness in place within the CALA region and speak directly to the businesses in Western Europe. One of the big things I've seen over my time, the past 2 decades in this industry, César, has been the fact that you've got a lot of countries where investment promotion agencies have got a good raw story. They've got a good package, but they don't position it right. And you can't take the positioning that you would make for an American or a Canadian prospective investor and then take that directly over to Western Europe. You've got to be able to tailor it to the audience that you're looking to try and sell. Now, we're seeing a lot of this right now, especially in the Caribbean for the UK. We're seeing some of the efforts around Invest Barbados, around JamPro, I believe Invest St. Lucia, and the investment promotion agency in Trinidad and Tobago, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines is doing the same thing, figuring out what British businesses and British investors are looking for and tailoring their message directly to that, localizing the message to what the pain points of UK businesses are. Now, I think the more and more we see investment promotion agencies and the BPO and IT service ecosystems take this approach, you'll see a lot more relevance that will be taken on by the investors in countries like France, like Germany, like Italy, like Spain, like Belgium, and they'll see the value that can be derived from the CALA region.
It all comes down to a good sales pitch, doesn't it?
I think it's a good sales pitch, but it's also know your market. You know, you go back to marketing 101 for those of us that studied business in university. It's pretty clear. You've got a position based on the market that you're attacking. And if you believe in the product, you believe in the service, and you understand the consumer, you understand the investor and what they're looking for, just aligning those pieces is so important.
Well, Peter, moving into another topic, you mentioned Ukraine. We spoke about Eastern Europe. What have been the effects of the war in Ukraine on the sourcing talent from Eastern Europe? Are we seeing a realignment that might move business towards other regions, whether that be Asia, Africa, or even the CALA region?
You would think so, but I'll tell you, one of the things that we're picking up in our research is that Central and Eastern Europe is hot right now. I just got back from Georgia a couple of weeks ago, and the enthusiasm for that market is off the charts currently amongst BPOs, not just in Western Europe, but also from North America and different parts of the world. You know, we've seen no shortage of interest in places like Poland. We've seen no shortage of interest in the Czech Republic. In other countries as well. Croatia, Albania are doing a lot of great work, and there's a lot of investment going in. So I would say that while there is uncertainty around the situation surrounding Ukraine and Russia, I don't think that's holding back either the emerging outsourcing operators in different countries or the more traditional locations, either in Central and Eastern Europe.
That's interesting. Going back to sources that we've spoken to, a couple of them mentioned this that you just said. There's uncertainty in Eastern Europe, yes, but they're not abandoning the region. I'm not sure why, but they are considering other options too.
I'm sure that they are. And it's smart for anybody to consider all the options that they have on the table. But keep in mind, Central and Eastern Europe has got, in most of the countries, significant investments in infrastructure the last 25, 30 years. And that's made them very seamless in terms of things like network connectivity, public transport, accessibility in and out of the countries. A tremendous labor force in terms of young people that come to the table with a very entrepreneurial spirit. Some I think really great advancements in terms of commercial property development for setting up different service delivery operations. Really, there's no shortage of reasons to look at Central and Eastern Europe, César. As you say, you know, this situation going on in Ukraine and Russia is not something that I would expect would be a great selling point for the region, but at the same time, it's not holding companies back from either investing or, if they've already got investments, from staying put.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Moving to another, well, staying in Europe, but moving to another region. The UK is going through a very interesting, or let's say challenging economic period. Does this make it a good moment to consider greater engagement with the Americas? Wouldn't that be a bit too complicated? Should they look to their nearshore instead of across the Atlantic?
I don't think that that's a bad thing at all. I think it makes sense. Look, British businesses and British business people have been among the most progressive when it comes to looking at new locations. I'd say from an outsourcing standpoint, it might be the most developed and the most audacious market in the world in regards to where they will have business services or IT services performed. Obviously, there's been a lot of disruption in the UK with Brexit. That's the obvious sticking point for a lot of people, and we do know that it's still something that the country is coming to grips with. At the same time, let's not underestimate the resilience of the United Kingdom. They've been counted out many times in the past, and they always come back stronger. You know, let's think about it. You know, after the Second World War, they roared back. after the situation in the 1970s with the winter of discontent and all the strikes that went on for nearly a decade. They came back stronger than ever. They came back after the miners' strike in the 1980s. Brexit is obviously something that's causing a lot of uncertainty. It's causing a lot of discussion and a lot of dispute in many quarters. At the same time, it's the fifth biggest economy in the world. It's not going away. And while I know that the economic prognostications have not been great, I think we've also learned our lesson not to take too much stock in terms of what the forecasts are, because they can change on a dime. And César, I'll just make a point. I get over to the UK quite frequently with work. And something that I would make a comment around is, you go to any of the major cities, whether it's London, whether it's Manchester, whether it's Glasgow, Birmingham, Bristol, people are still out in the pubs. People are still out in the restaurants. People are still spending money on the high streets. There's a lot of things going on. People are still going on vacation. So let's not give ourselves the impression that the country's in some depression. There's a lot of activity happening, and those activities need to be supported on the back end, whether it's business processes or whether it's IT services.
Well, Peter, we're out of time, and I'm out of questions, at least for today. Thanks a lot for being with me.
You know where to find me. You know where to find me.
Of course I know. Of course I know. And I'll probably launch a couple questions your way over the couple following days. But anyways, thanks a lot for your time, for being with us here today. Delighted to have you here. I'm really looking forward to your participation at Crossconnect. You'll be not only moderating a debate, but you'll be a speaker, right?
I'll be participating in one too, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, again, thanks. So, folks, just to remind you, March 8, 10 a.m., London time, of course, Crossconnect Forum. If you plan to register, I insist, do it soon enough. There's been a lot of excitement over this event. You can register at crossconnectforum.com. I'll be linking to the site in the description, and I'll probably be showing a banner or something in this video. So anyways, just go there, register. We will be seeing each other March the 8th.